paradrama tales.
She looked me in the eye and said, "What if we open things up?" Just like that. Casual, curious. Like it was some light suggestion over coffee. But for me, it was the moment I realized she wasn't choosing freedom. She was unchoosing me. 5 years is a long time to build something. It's not just time, it's habits, routines, private jokes. It's the way your toothbrush finds a place in someone else's cup, the way her hand automatically reaches for yours in crowded places, the way you both instinctively scan the menu for something the other might like. We built a life together, piece by piece. Nothing flashy, just consistent, just ours. She knew how I liked my coffee black, strong, no sugar. I knew she couldn't sleep without some kind of white noise. She handled the plants. I took care of the bills. We talked about the future like it was already ours. We didn't always agree, but we worked through things. I thought that's what made us solid, the effort, not just the chemistry. There were no signs. That's what I keep coming back to. No wild nights out, no weird DMs on her phone, no sudden distance. If anything, we felt settled, comfortable, maybe too comfortable. Looking back now, I can't help but wonder, did she mistake that comfort for boredom? Did she think our rhythm meant we were missing something? Because I didn't. I liked what we had. I trusted it. I wasn't chasing fireworks. I just wanted steady flame. And I thought she did too. We talked about marriage once, nothing too formal, just one of those someday conversations you have while folding laundry. I said I didn't need anything fancy. She smiled and said I wouldn't want anything else. That's the version of her I kept replaying when she sat across from me last week and said those words. What if we open things up? Like we were discussing a new series to watch or a restaurant to try. Like it was casual, neutral. But for me, it wasn't hypothetical. It wasn't just a question. It was the first crack in the story I thought we were writing together. Because here's the truth. When you spend 5 years giving someone your loyalty without conditions, you don't expect them to ask you to share them. And I know people will say, she was just asking, just exploring, just being honest. But there are some things you don't explore when you've built your foundation on exclusivity and trust. Some doors once opened, even just in conversation, don't close the same way. So, yeah, I didn't yell, I didn't beg, I didn't accuse her of cheating or demand answers I knew would only deepen the wound. I just heard the sentence, and I remembered every ordinary, beautiful, loyal moment that came before it. And I realized I was the only one still living inside that version of us. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just gotten off a long Zoom meeting, made dinner, and we were sitting on the couch sharing a bowl of pasta and half watching some documentary we'd both already lost interest in. It wasn't a tense night. It wasn't a fight. It was one of those soft, quiet evenings that make you think this is the kind of life I want. Predictable, safe, shared. And then she turned to me, bare-legged in one of my old hoodies, fork resting in her bowl, and asked it. So, what if we tried an open relationship? Just like that. No build-up, no warning, no careful introduction, or, hey, can we talk about something important? Just a question dropped in the middle of dinner, like it was nothing, like it was casual, harmless. I didn't react right away. I actually blinked and laughed a little because I thought she was joking. She wasn't. I asked her what she meant just to be sure. Maybe I misheard. Maybe she was talking about a book or a movie plot. But no, she meant exactly what she said. Like, being able to sleep with other people. Just physical stuff. Nothing emotional. We'd still be together, obviously. Obviously? She said it like the bond we had could stretch that far without tearing. Like she could separate love and intimacy into tidy compartments, and I'd just go along with it. Like I hadn't spent 5 years giving her every ounce of exclusivity I had without ever needing to say it out loud. It hit me all at once. Not just what she was asking, but what she had already imagined. Because you don't bring that kind of question up unless you've already entertained the answers. Unless you've pictured the scenarios done, the justifying tried, on the logic, and decided it fits your skin. And in that moment, sitting there with a forkful of pasta halfway to my mouth, I realized something brutal. This wasn't about what she wanted. This was about what she no longer valued, at least not in the way I did. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the bowl. I didn't accuse or demand or fall apart. I just went quiet. Because when someone tells you who they are, or worse, what they're willing to become, you don't need to negotiate. You just need to listen. And I did. I heard everything she wasn't saying, that maybe she was restless, that maybe she wanted freedom more than foundation, that maybe monogamy wasn't her language anymore, and I knew without question that I wasn't going to learn how to speak that. There's this idea people love to sell you that asking questions is harmless, that as long as you say it gently, as long as you follow it with just curious, or you don't have to say yes, it shouldn't be held against you. But let me tell you something. Some questions are fire alarms. They don't burn down the house, but they tell you it's already on fire. Because when someone asks you, what if we saw other people, what they're actually asking is, would you be willing to rewrite the rules so I can feel less confined? And when the rules are the very thing you built your love on, that's not a conversation, that's a crack in the ground. People say she was just being honest. That's better than cheating. Sure, I'll give her that. But what people don't talk about is what happens after honesty lands like a punch you didn't see coming. They don't talk about the way it makes you question every memory. Was she happy on that trip we took last fall? Did she mean it when she said I was enough? They don't talk about how it steals your appetite, how it sits in your chest like a stone while you're brushing your teeth, walking the dog, trying to sleep next to someone who just dropped a bomb between you both. Here's the part. People forget. You're allowed to have limits, even in love, especially in love. You're allowed to say no, that's not something I will explore with you. You're allowed to believe in exclusivity without being labeled insecure. You're allowed to hear a question like that and answer it with your absence. Because not all questions are invitations. Some are confessions, and some are quiet declarations that the person you loved is walking in a direction you will not follow. I didn't slam the door. I didn't accuse her of being a cheater. I didn't call her names or try to make her feel small. I just recognized what was really happening. She wasn't asking me to open a relationship. She was asking me to close a chapter, and I did. You don't get to ask that question twice with someone like me, because love is a choice, and so is loyalty. And the second you turn it into a multiple-choice test, you've already failed what mattered most. There was a time, maybe 2-3 years ago, when I would have stayed and argued. I would have paced the room, run my hands through my hair, asked why a dozen different ways. I would have pleaded for clarity, not because I didn't understand, but because I didn't want to accept what I already knew. But that version of me, he's gone. That night I didn't raise my voice. I didn't guilt trip her. I didn't say anything cruel. I just listened until the silence between her words said more than anything else could. Then I stood up, walked into the bedroom, and pulled out a weekend bag. Nothing dramatic, no slamming drawers, no tossing photos into the trash. Just enough clothes for a few days, my charger, my car keys, and the sense that I was walking out of something that had already quietly ended. She followed me down the hall. Wait, where are you going? I didn't answer. Can we just talk about this? But we already had. That question. What if we opened things up wasn't just a thought. It was a pivot. It told me that she'd already considered a future where I wasn't enough, and that she wanted permission to explore it. I wasn't going to stay and debate whether or not I should compete with strangers for her affection. So I walked. I drove to my parents' place, the same house where I first learned what love looks like when it's steady. Lights still on in the kitchen. My mom was surprised to see me. My dad didn't ask questions. They just poured me a cup of tea and sat with me in the quiet like parents do when their grown child shows up and doesn't have the words yet. The next morning, her texts started coming in. I didn't mean it like that. I was just exploring the idea. We should talk. But the thing is, I didn't leave because she wanted to talk to someone else. I left because she didn't realize I'd spent 5 years believing I was enough. And maybe that's on me. Maybe I should have seen it coming. Maybe I should have asked more questions. But love, when it's real, doesn't make you second-guess your place. It doesn't test your limits just to see if you'll stay. Leaving wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was the cleanest form of self-respect I had left. Because when someone you love asks if they can try life without you, even part-time, you don't stand there and sell them reasons to stay. You let them find out. And you go. The thing about regret is, it always shows up late. By the time it knocks the door it's hoping to enter through has usually already closed, not slammed, not locked, just quietly, firmly no longer ajar. She started texting the morning after I left. First, it was just one message, can we talk? Then another, I didn't mean to hurt you. I wasn't thinking. Then a wall of text, half apology, half explanation. She said it was just a thought, not a plan. That she loved me. That I was still the one she wanted to come home to. I read every word. I really did. Not because I was looking for a reason to come back, but because I wanted to understand what she thought she was saving. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can rewrite the story so quickly. How what felt like a deliberate choice on Tuesday becomes just a question on Thursday. As if I imagined the shift, as if the ground hadn't actually moved beneath us. She called once. I didn't answer. Then again and again. I didn't block her. I just didn't engage. Because regret, no matter how raw or loud or desperate, isn't always enough. It doesn't erase what was said. It doesn't undo the moment where you feel your value recalibrated in someone else's mind. It doesn't patch over the sting of realizing the person you trusted with your whole heart was quietly negotiating how to share you without ever asking if you'd agree. I think she wanted me to say, "It's okay I overreacted," or "Let's talk it through. Maybe there's a middle ground." But here's the truth. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't hoping she'd fight harder. I had simply reached the point where I understood her remorse wasn't mine to manage. It wasn't my job to comfort her through the discomfort of her own choices. It wasn't my job to make her feel better about the damage she caused just by asking a question. It wasn't my job to teach her why that question broke something I couldn't piece back together. People always say relationships require forgiveness, and maybe they do. But forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes forgiveness just means clarity, the clarity to say, "I hear your apology. I believe you regret it, and I'm still not coming back." Because love without trust is just emotional performance, and I'm not showing up to a stage where the script changes halfway through without telling me. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that phrase open relationship. It sounds modern, doesn't it? Progressive. Like something you're not supposed to be upset about if you want to be seen as emotionally evolved. Because now, everything is about boundaries and exploration and not being possessive. There are articles, podcasts, entire communities built around this idea that monogamy is outdated, that if you truly love someone, you don't limit them. And maybe that's true. For some people. Maybe for them it really is just another version of connection. Maybe there are couples who thrive that way, who communicate clearly, who honor each other even while touching other skin. But that wasn't us. That was never us. We were the inside jokes, the lazy Sundays, the shared playlists. We were making each other the default, not the option. We were choosing one another every day with full intention and zero competition. So when she looked at me and said she wanted to sleep with other people just physically, I didn't hear curiosity. I heard distance. I heard permission seeking. I heard her telling me softly, politely, carefully that I was no longer enough. And here's where I land. When you've built a relationship on the foundation of exclusivity, when your love has always had a locked door and both keys were inside, asking to open that door isn't neutral. It's not a conversation starter. It's a shift in architecture. And for me, that shift was betrayal. Not because I think she slept with someone, not because I think she intended to, but because she introduced the idea of others without ever once checking if us was still sacred. And look, I'm not here to shame people in open relationships. Some folks navigate them with integrity, with care, with communication that most monogamous couples could learn from. But that wasn't the language we spoke. That wasn't what we signed up for. And when someone tries to rewrite the rules without you even kindly, even calmly, it's still a kind of betrayal. Not loud, not violent. Just quiet enough to make you question if you're the one being unreasonable. But I wasn't. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't close-minded. I was just clear. Clear that I want a relationship where love means we face the world together, not separately. Where what if doesn't include anyone else's body. Where loyalty isn't an outdated idea, it's the point. So, no, I don't feel guilty for walking away. I feel proud that I knew the difference between a relationship that bends and one that breaks. A lot of people think leaving means giving up too soon. That if I just stayed a little longer, listened a little more, been a little more open-minded, we could have worked through it. That relationships are supposed to stretch to flex to survive uncomfortable conversations. And I agree to a point, but there's a difference between compromise and collapse. And there are moments when staying isn't strength, it's surrender. When she asked for an open relationship, I knew exactly what the next few days could look like if I stayed. We'd have the talk. She'd tell me it was just an idea, that she didn't mean to hurt me. She'd backpedal off her rules, say it would only happen with people we didn't know, that it might even be good for us, and I'd listen. Not because I agreed, but because I'd still be trying to protect the love we'd built. I'd be trying to salvage 5 years of shared memories from one moment of difference. But I also know myself. I know the way I'd start to shrink in that dynamic. I'd say no, and she'd say, just think about it. I'd say it's not who I am, and she'd say, but it's just physical. And little by little, I'd start to wonder if I was being irrational. If my boundaries were just insecurities dressed in old-fashioned clothes. That's how erosion works. Not in a wave, but in steady, quiet give-ins. And I've done that before. I've stayed in places too long, negotiated with things that were never negotiable to begin with. I know what it feels like to slowly forget your own worth just to keep someone close. I wasn't going to do that again. I didn't leave because I was stubborn. I left because I was finally clear. You don't debate over the lock on the door once you've agreed to keep it shut. You don't renegotiate faithfulness like it's a payment plan. And you don't stay just because you're afraid to start over. She thought we could talk it through. But you don't talk through a value system, you either share it or you don't. And when that's broken, the healthiest thing you can do is walk away before you start bending yourself into a shape you won't recognize. So, no, I didn't stay to negotiate, because what she asked for wasn't a question, it was a reveal. And what I chose in return wasn't punishment, it was peace. Here's what no one tells you. Leaving isn't always about hate. Sometimes it's about love, and the quiet realization that love on its own just isn't enough. I didn't walk out of that apartment because I stopped loving her. I walked out because I still did. I loved her enough not to try and twist her into someone she wasn't. I loved her enough not to guilt her into staying in a box she clearly wanted to step out of. And I loved myself enough not to stay where I wasn't being fully chosen. That part, that was the hardest. Because when people think of breakups, they imagine betrayal, screaming matches, cheating secrets, something dramatic. But what if it's none of that? What if it's just a sentence said too casually that reveals a crack you can't unsee? What if we open things up? That one sentence shattered something. Not because I couldn't handle the conversation, but because the conversation told me that we no longer wanted the same kind of future. And when you're standing at that crossroads with someone you love deeply on one side, and your non-negotiables on the other, you can't take both paths. You can't drag someone into your version of love and call it compromise. You can't shrink your values into silence and pretend that's growth. So, I chose the harder path, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. And yes, it hurt. It still does. I miss her sometimes in the small, stupid ways. The way she used to tap her fingers on the steering wheel in traffic. The way she'd mumble songs in the kitchen when she thought I wasn't listening. The way we never had to fill silences because comfort lived there. But then I remember the silence that followed that conversation. How loud it was. How unfamiliar. How suddenly I felt like a guest in a love I used to feel safe in. And I remind myself, you can miss someone and still know you made the right choice. You can grieve a future even if it was never going to work. People think love means staying, but real love with dignity, love with self-respect, sometimes means walking away. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself too. So, no, I don't regret loving her. But I also don't regret leaving, because choosing peace over potential is not failure, it's freedom. I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because I finally understood something that took me years to learn. You don't have to stay just because the love is still there. You don't have to wait for the damage to be physical or public or explosive. Sometimes it's just a quiet shift, a single question, a moment where you realize I don't belong in this version of love anymore. And that's enough. I don't hate her. I don't wish her pain. In some strange way, I hope she finds what she's looking for, someone who shares her vision, her openness, her boundaries. But I also hope she never forgets the man who didn't yell, didn't shame her, didn't beg, just packed his things and walked away with dignity. Because not all endings are loud. Some are just honest. And to anyone watching this who's been made to feel unreasonable for wanting exclusivity, for expecting to be enough, for choosing a love that doesn't need extra options to feel whole, let me say this. You are not old-fashioned. You are not dramatic. You are not insecure. You are just clear. Drop a comment if you've ever been told your standards were too much. Share your story the moment you realized someone else's curiosity wasn't your obligation. And if you believe love shouldn't require negotiation to be respected, hit subscribe. Because love should never feel like a compromise of your core. And leaving? That's not weakness. That's what strength looks like when it finally learns to stop explaining itself.